So thank you guys all for coming out for Psychology of Tomb Raider. We've already started talking about it a little bit. I'm excited. I'm Heather Ness. I go to panels at different cons and things and talk about the psychology, mostly of superheroes, but also of different video games and anime as well. And then I talk about, post these videos, have a podcast on my website, superpsych.com. My background is in clinical psychology, so I'm really focused on mental disorders, treatment for that, reasons behind it. That's not necessarily what I'll be focusing on so much today, but that's kind of the perspective that I just naturally look at things through. You, sir, just asked me a little bit ago why I wanted to do Psychology of Tomb Raider. And really, like, my best answer for it, like, she's really badass. She's really cool. I enjoy playing the games. Plus, they just did a movie, so it just seemed kind of really on topic. How many of you guys played Tomb Raider? A Tomb Raider game. The odds are really good because there's a million. So cool. Speaking of how many there are, let's just talk about Lara Croft for a second. Here's some of the games. Not even all of them. They first started making them, I believe, in '96. And they were so popular, they cranked out a game a year. They slowed down for Angel of Darkness, and slowed down for some of the other ones, but they have continuously been making these games for over the past decade, which kind of just gets at just how popular she is. Something about Lara Croft gets to people. They like playing as her. Not only the games, they made a couple of movies. We won't talk about those too much. They just made that new one. Even Angelina Jolie talking about her character. She was impressed with her own character, saying, Laura's a bit of everything. She's like every kind of sexy Italian actress I've ever watched, and yet she's also that guy in Crocodile Hunter in Australia. Whoever he is. Completely in love with danger. I really like this quote. This quote's kind of going to set the tone for the rest of this panel, because being the nerd that I am, I wanted to do my research on Lara Croft. I'm like, I can't just stand up here and talk about how amazing I think she is. What are research people saying about her? Video game researchers, psychologists. And one thing that they just focus on in the different research is just how sexy she is. But also how intelligent she is. And researchers, I'm gonna be honest with you, have a really rough time with that. And we'll get back to that, but those are the two things that they really focus on with her. With Lara Croft, she became so popular. She was one of the first female protagonists in video games. And she was kind of like the trailblazer for that. So much so that it's actually referred to as the Lara phenomenon. That more video games felt okay about incorporating these strong female protagonists in their games. So I started doing a character profile on Lara Croft. If I could break down, like, what are all of her different personality traits and her strengths, her characteristics. And here's just some of them. One I was just mentioning is she is intelligent. If you know anything about intelligence, people have different kinds of intelligence. There's many different theories about, what is intelligence, how can we measure it, what does it look like when people have it. Not all psychologists can agree on it. But one type of intelligence that we kind of talk about is problem solving. Being able to look at the situation that you've never been in before and just figure it out. Some people are really good at academic smarts, book smarts, being in class. And we kind of, like, as a society, focus on that. But this is one component of intelligence, right? Some people, they don't want to sit and study books and memorize things and then do it all over on a test again. But they're really creative. Or they can come up to a puzzle and figure it out. Or they might be in a situation in real life, they have some kind of practical intelligence. That's Lara Croft. She can come up, as you're playing her, you have all of these different puzzles and situations that you gotta figure out. as you're playing with her, you have to figure out those situations. She's good at it, and therefore the player's also good at it. So naturally, the character, she's good at problem solving, but she has this sense of adventure. She was a graduate of Gordonstown. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But this is actually it's a real school. Any of you guys see The Crown? It's a Netflix original. Anyways, it's cool. So, it's this school, it used to be an all-boys school, but it's not anymore, apparently. Or maybe they just let Laura Croft in. It's basically like a really great private school, but also boot camp. If you ever were to watch The Crown, that's about Queen Elizabeth and her husband, he went there, Prince Philip went there, and he thought it was amazing. And then he sent his son there, and his son, Charles, was like, this is horrible because it's freezing, and they don't give us blankets, and we have to sleep on the floor, and then we have to wade through the mud, and then carry a log, and then do our algebra, and it's awful. Laura did it, apparently, as a character, and she excelled at it. And she's part of the British elite, but she kind of, it wasn't good enough for her to be part of the British elite. She had whatever desire to leave that place of safety and go looking for adventure, the opposite of safety. So besides her intelligence, she has some physical intelligence as well. Being able to use your body in such a way, like a gymnast. They have a kind of intelligence that I certainly don't have. I have that book smarts, academic sort of intelligence. Not so much practical or being able to know how to use my body and move it in space the way that I want it to. She does. She's like a gymnast, trained rock climber, has knowledge with expert shooting, a motorcyclist, and because of her education, she uses her knowledge in archaeology to then satisfy that desire for adventure. She's also a best-selling author. But here's one thing. If you've played her games before, what's kind of like one of the things that first pops into your head about Laura Croft? Her boobs. Those great triangle boobs. I love it when people cosplay, where they do the triangle. Yeah, they do the triangle. I'm like, you are funny. So she was first created with her pixelated giant triangle boobs. And what actually happens and why this got to be such an icon and one of the first things that you think about it was just an office joke. People who were making Laura Croft were just literally dicking around, and they were like, ha, look at this is funny. And then they just kind of continued. And now it's this icon, it's this thing that we think about. And kind of the main complaint or focus that researchers have is that, yeah, Laura Croft might be so powerful and so intelligent, but then she's also objectified and over-sexualized. It went from being, okay, this office joke, and then someone was like, hey, I know you're joking around, but like this is about to sell. We're about to make some money off of this. Let's just go ahead and do it. So game developers had that motivation. Why not? People will buy it. So I guess it kind of gets into this question of, well, she's really intelligent and everything, but does that even count? Because she's so sexualized. Here's where researchers, like myself, kind of start thinking about, does this objectification, this hypersexualization, even matter? And a lot of researchers are going to say yes. So they're saying, okay, well, guys might pick up this game and play it for whatever reason, because they like playing as a sexy character. They can watch her, and then they're also having a good time. But then they're like, well, girls will pick up the game and start playing and see this woman who has this body that no woman can really have. And then they'll feel bad about themselves. This theory, the social identity theory, basically sums down to, if you identify with this character, like, oh, that person's like me, but they are portrayed negatively, then you feel bad about yourself. If they're portrayed positively, then you feel good about yourself. So I guess what researchers are getting into is women see another woman character, and they're like, ah, I woman, she woman. But she's not portrayed well. Is that how the world thinks about me? And then uses that either like maybe feel good about themselves or feel bad about themselves. And then women tend to report, they're like, we like playing these games, and we like having these strong female characters, but we don't really care for this hypersexualization. We don't like to have to, deal with that as we're playing these cool games. So based in this whole other theory that a lot of psychologists use, not just in video games, but in other areas as well, they're like, hey, this is a problem. We can't keep making video game characters like this. So, you have to ask, does the character's sexiness negate her strength and her intelligence? All these articles that I was reading, they really just had a rough time with it. Like, wow, she's so intelligent, but she's sexy. That's a hard one to wrap our brains around. And then they mentioned, they were like, we're looking at all of these different characters. There was this one study for the past 31 years, they looked at all the video games that had a strong female protagonist. And they were listed all of their different kinds of attributes, the kind of positive traits that they had, their strengths, and then looked at, well, how are they portrayed physically? And they're like, there's never a strong, independent character, female character, who isn't shown hypersexually. So it's like, well, game developers will allow these characters to exist, but only if they're pleasing to look at. But then we've gotten to, as we kind of develop, we're doing more research, and especially with women gamers and how they react as they're playing, we're kind of changing that opinion a little bit. So maybe it's not necessarily a contradiction to be both sexy and empowered. So one of the researchers that I looked at was saying, so the characters they are playing, women are playing, may look odd. They might have these weird triangular boobs that are like 8 sizes too big. My main concern is the waist, because like not all the organs are clearly in there. Thighs are also way too long, but anyways. So they may look odd, they're weird. They're not realistic. But they are competent, and they do occupy a powerful position in the virtual world of the video game. So it's really hard to underestimate the amount of influence that Laura has had on video games. And just like on society in general. You might not have, there was a time and place, I never saw any of the movies, never played any of the games, but I had a really good idea about who Laura Croft was, because she just permeates culture so much and has such influence. Some researchers came to the conclusions that maybe even if these characters are wearing whatever kind of revealing clothing, that doesn't negate their empowerment. It depends on how that character is being portrayed. Maybe even if I'm playing a Tomb Raider game and I see Laura Croft doing all this, I can still be empowered even if she doesn't necessarily look just like me. But I'm playing as her, and I'm playing as an intelligent, really powerful, badass character. Another researcher came to the conclusion that even though Laura Croft's outward appearance, it's coded with much more than just a knockout body. She's also an adventure model, and many female players find her a role model who can solve her own problems, exuding intelligence in addition to sexiness. So it's kind of, in my very personal opinion, really kind of uncool to reduce Lara Croft just to her sexiness. And then kind of come to a conclusion like, oh, this is a bad role model for girls because look how short her shorts are, or she shows her tummy, and the body isn't exactly what little girls will look like, that kind of thing. But what it ends up doing is forgetting about her intelligence, her physical ability, her past, her education, this desire to be better and to go into whatever kind of dangerous situations and be good at it. Many of the traits that we talked about with Laura in that list, a lot of times cultures kind of code, they'll have ideal values and they code them as masculine. There was a study where the researchers went to various different cultures and they got a couple of groups of people. And one group of people, they were like, here's a bunch of different values, circle the ones that you think are ideal. And then in the other group, they were like, here are a bunch of different values, circle the ones that you think are masculine. And then they compared the answers between these groups, and they were pretty much the same. For whatever reason, cultures across the globe, even if they value different values or different personal traits, that might differ between cultures. But what seems to keep happening is cultures, whatever their ideal values are, they code them or think of them as being masculine traits. And then the less desirable traits are coded or seen as more feminine. So things like toughness, intelligence, power, all those things that Laura is. We kind of, as a society, in our own culture, we look at violence or aggression or strength, like physical strength, and we kind of code it as being masculine. If you see a woman, a lot of times people, if she's incredibly strong, like power lifters or CrossFit women, a lot of times people kind of talk about them or think of them as being more masculine than feminine. So we just kind of, in our heads, maybe because society has taught us to do so, think of these traits, call them masculine. So Laura, even though she has this very feminine body with these feminine curves, seductive lips, oversized eyes, she still exudes whatever our culture calls masculine because she is dominant. When if you ever played any of the games, no one's really telling her what to do. No one else is making those decisions for her. Usually in the games, she is the primary protagonist or character, and the focus remains incredibly right on her. I think in Angel of Darkness there was this other dude that you could play as for a while, but it switched back to her. There's the possibility that maybe we get a little, maybe game designers get a little uneasy creating these female characters with what we think of as masculine traits. Independence, power, being an expert sharpshooter. And so maybe those masculine traits become a little more, there we go. They become a little more easy to swallow when we see hyper feminine physical characteristics. Does that kind of make any sense? So like, sure, we're giving her these masculine traits and that's kind of weird for us somehow. So in which case, to balance things out, let's give her these incredibly big boobs that would literally cause imbalance, but they're balancing it out. They're balancing out the masculine traits. So let's think, what are the effects that sexualized characters can have on gamers? And it's not necessarily negative for female players. You have to ask the question, how much does the player identify with the character? So if I'm playing a game, it might be a female character, but if I don't even really like her or connect with her, how much will I actually identify with her? How much will how she's portrayed affect my self-identity? Maybe not at all. How also is the character overall portrayed? What are their interactions with other characters? So Laura is always portrayed as being someone who's in charge, knowing what she's doing. She interacts with other characters, particularly other male characters, and they might make jokes or they might try to overpower her, but they don't get anywhere with it. And then, what other positive traits does the character have? So like with Laura, she has this intelligence and this physical ability, so I could play as her, and it's like, yeah, okay, she looks ridiculous. But I'm playing as this woman who's like, man, if I could be as kick-ass as her, I would do it in like a heartbeat. Like just quit everything, fly my own plane, crash land it because I can, and then get out and then shoot some wolves. I wouldn't because I actually really like wolves. But like, if they were about to kill me, shoot some wolves out of this bow and arrow that I just made. It's like, yeah, this is like a fantasy for me, right? You could play as that. Because I'm not reducing her just down to that really odd shape that she has. I see it, but I kind of laugh. Move on with life. I can connect with her, like, yeah, this is my ideal. If I can't, but I'll play as her and feel good of myself. So maybe, instead of having these negative effects that social identity theory talks about, actually has some positive effects on female players. You guys ever hear of the Rorschach ink blot test? Yeah, that's kind of famous. They don't make a whole lot of sense, but I'll try and help you guys out. What they are is just these random pictures. And this isn't one of them, actually. This is Google Images messing around. But it's something like this, where the pictures aren't of anything. They're whatever you happen to see. They're so ambiguous, whatever you happen to see. And always perfectly symmetrical. And they're referred to as projection tests, because the idea is you look at it, and then whatever you're kind of feeling at the time, or whatever's really important to you, that's what will come to mind from these very ambiguous figures. So the idea is, whatever people answer about these things, it'll show some insight into what's important to them, or what's on their mind. If you've ever gone on any kind of character forum or discussion board, what have you, people will argue so much about minute details about characters that weren't explicit either in the game or in the show or whatever. I think because we play as these characters or we watch these characters and we're like, yeah, I identify with her. And even if it's not made explicit, we kind of project onto these characters ideals or values that matter to us. So I don't think in the games do they ever make it explicit what her sexuality is, for example. But if you go on any of these forums, people argue about it. People will be like, oh, she's clearly straight. She's going to do this thing for a while, and then she's going to go back. She's going to eventually be a wife and kids and have a nice life. Okay, if that's cool, if that's what you want for this character, cool beans. Other people will be like, we're not playing the same game, my man. She is clearly a lesbian. I don't know. But they project onto it, whatever it is that you need. Characters, in a way, become their own projection test. I'll give you an example, because I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it. You guys remember the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies? Did you guys see the Homecoming one? Yeah, okay. So I've always been a huge Spider-Man fan. Since like, I don't know, I got born, I got here, and then my dad was like, here's this great character that you need to love for the rest of your life. And I was like, okay, Dad. So I've always loved Spider-Man. But I have this friend who's also always loved Spider-Man. I couldn't challenge his devotedness to this character. It must be on the same level as my own. We watched Homecoming, and I was like, that was a movie. That wasn't my Spider-Man. It was a fun time. It was a good movie. That's not the Spider-Man that I know and love. He came out of the movie, and he was like, that was the best rendition of Spider-Man that has ever happened. And I'm like, oh, okay. We could argue about it, but like, you read comics, and you watch Spider-Man, you watch these characters, you get out of it what you want, and what you need. And then that character fulfills that need for you. Maybe you see like different traits in them, and it helps you, like with Spider-Man. Whatever different anxieties or problems that he's going through, I can relate to it. Certain ones. With him, this character, he sees the other stuff in it. And then that helps him with whatever his anxieties or problems. And then that character helps him with that. It's kind of the same thing with Lara Croft. There was a research study where they just asked people, what are your reactions as you're playing as Tomb Raider? These female gamers. And one woman talked about how her friend just died recently. And to cope with it, she played some Tomb Raider games. And she said, this helped me because I felt with my friend dying, I felt like I had no control. Like life is just random and weird and things happen and we can't do anything about it. And that was tough for me to figure out. So I played this game as this woman, this character, who figures out puzzles all the time. And I got to do that with her. And that helped me with my grieving process. So she was able to project onto Lara Croft whatever it was that she needed at that time, dealing with that grief, that death of the friend. So when we play these different video games, and it doesn't even have to be Tomb Raider, but just think of like your favorite game that you love playing over and over, and maybe that character that you relate to. As you're playing as this character, you get to kind of be that character for a little while. So all of the traits that Lara has, you get to have for a little while as you play the game, which in itself is incredibly empowering. You can overcome these problems, solve the puzzles, defeat the enemies. You can face death and come out the other side with some sort of self-satisfaction or reward. So, I guess what I kind of would like to leave with you guys before we go into like a question and answer portion is, I guess, thinking a little bit more critically about different characters like Lara Croft. Because sometimes we like to make these sweeping judgments. It's like, oh, we see this person or this character hypersexualized. Bad. Or same thing with a person, hypersexualized, wearing whatever kind of outfit or clothing. Definitely not intelligent or empowered or strong. Let's rethink that easy coding that our society has taught us, looking at people as well-rounded. Do you guys have any questions? If you want to talk about your favorite Lara Croft game, or any questions about her personality, or what you can either shout it at me, or that mic is also on. Whatever is most comfortable for you.
If you've never played one of these games before, what would you recommend be the threshold? Like first game of Tomb Raider.
If you've never played before,
yeah.
I would say like the first one of the new trilogy that just came out.
Right. Okay. Everyone's
No, not Rise.
Not Rise.
No,
It's just
Rise
called
is-
Tomb Raider.
It's just Tomb Raider?
Rise-
Tomb Raider, yeah.
Rise is,
Oh, yeah.
Rise is the second one.
And then the one that coming out now.
It's
Shadow.
Shadow.
Third.
yeah, it's just Tomb Raider there. That in the bottom
I
one.
forgot that one even existed.
That one's pretty cool. That starts her off.
It's a prequel.
Yeah, it's a reboot, but it's younger Laura. So like the original games, she's older. So this kind of shows you how she got to that point. I have a friend who's an anthropologist. Loves playing as this. Okay.
So, have you ever played Horizon Zero Dawn?
I haven't, but it is on the list.
Okay, so I haven't finished that game, so nobody tell me the ending. But I do enjoy the game. I love the graphics. Visually, it's spectacular, and the story's pretty good. But I don't connect with Aloy the way I connect with Lara, and I think maybe it's not, because when you say like maybe it's the hypersexuality, like maybe that is something that I guess I like about a lot of the female characters. But even still, like with this last Tomb Raider that came out, which was these last two, and I'm sure the third one's gonna be great. They were so good, you know, it was so good. And obviously she's younger, so she's not gonna look like that. But I still connected with that game, you know. So I don't know, like maybe there is something like special about Laura, because I mean Aloy, I don't know, when I play Horizon, I'm just like, I see a lot of Tomb Raider in that game, but I don't know, I just don't connect with her as much. So, yeah.
Do you know like what it is about Laura that you think that you might connect with?
I mean, everything that you said, like, you know, of course she's badass, you know, I think also since playing the first one, I love the puzzles that we had to solve, and like, just the story was, especially the first game, like, I don't know, like, even though these last ones are really good, that first one, for some reason, it was also kind of scary too, you know, like I think that's what it is, that sense of danger that I really, really like, and I just don't get that same feeling from Horizon like I do with Tomb Raider, because she kind of has everything like laid out for her a little bit, but Laura has to go get this herself, you know.
Right. So maybe it's like that sense of adventure that you're connecting
Yeah.
with, or the danger. What do you?
I just want to say, first off, the next Tomb Raider has already cost $100 million to make. I feel like in the last two games, it's actually like made her like kind of less sexualized than in like previous games.
Oh yeah, I think so as well. So I can share with you guys, if you are interested, some of the research that was done. Like the one that I was talking about where they looked at the past 31 years, and they only looked at Angel of Darkness and previous. So that's still, when did that come out, like 2000, something like that. Not looking at the much newer ones, which I think because there has been so much recoil because of Laura's body shape, game developers are like, all right, let's make this a little bit more realistic for people to play. What do you got for me?
Okay, so the last games that just came out for Tomb Raider, like the first two, and then the one that's coming out, do you think this version of Laura came out at a good time for how they changed her body style and everything, versus just for like the time we're in where they're trying to put more female power and stuff like that into the world as they are?
I think so, because there's kind of, the trend kind of started in the 90s, but there has been more, not just in Tomb Raider and in video games, but like in movies and comic books as well. Because, like Star Wars, making Rogue One and making Rey the more central protagonist. Comic books having a lot of characters, female characters, not just be the sidekicks anymore or the side characters, but giving like some, like Batgirl got a good writer for once. So yeah, I do think it has been it is a trend.
So during your talk, you were talking about how her overemphasis of like feminine traits can be at I guess, conflict with the masculine traits that we typically perceive. Would you agree with the statement that the overemphasis of the feminine traits could actually serve to more, I guess, pull what we consider traditionally masculine into the realm of what we consider feminine? That's what I was kind of like getting.
Okay.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, so where I was kind of starting at for is just making it easier to see those traits. But yeah, I do think that one of the positive effects possibly of having Laura be so attractive is there's kind of a tendency for, I'm going to come up with it on the spot, like the Legally Blonde effect, where if someone's so pretty and so attractive that she doesn't get taken seriously. So maybe someone can play this game who has felt that before, and because her attractiveness is focused on so much, but at the same level of all of her positive traits, then they can feel like, oh, I feel good about myself. Like society is like not taking me seriously, but they're definitely taking Laura Croft seriously. Or other people who haven't gone through that similar experience, they can play as Laura and then gain a better respect for people who are attractive but also are incredibly empowered. So yeah, I think so. It kind of like balances things out.
I haven't played all the Tomb Raider, really. So it seems to me that most of the Tomb Raider series, you have very positive, as you put, masculine traits and very positive or desirable feminine traits. And to me, that's fine because everybody gets what they want. But are there any, other than the fact that someone might perceive, as you said, someone being too pretty to be taken seriously, is there any time in the game where that actually happens? Does she ever use her sexuality as a means of getting something rather than in a way that a man wouldn't do, for example?
I do, like if you guys have an example, let's have it, but I can't think of in the games. Like she can be...
It was like maybe during like a cut scene, but never really like, unless anybody else remembers.
She's really intelligent over anything.
Yeah, it's usually more like, or she
side.
might even be charming.
Yeah.
She's got that dry voice.
I wouldn't count that just because.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because like in Rise of the Tomb Raider, she's empathetic towards Jacob when he's trying to get her to avoid going to the source.
Yeah.
But she's like, but it was the last thing that my dad did before he died, and I have to honor that. And I mean, that's the only time that she's used the quote unquote more of a feminine thing to try to coerce.
She doesn't necessarily always use like physical power to convince somebody to do something, but
Loyalty is not a necessarily feminine only trait. So yeah, I see that.
And like when I talk about like masculine traits, they're not inherently biologically masculine or feminine. I just want to declare, it's just for whatever reason, cultures we put that on there. Like, because we do it for whatever all the time.
Yeah.
Or we'll see somebody act a certain way, and we just make snap judgments about them all the time. Because our society comes up with what is normal for a guy or for a girl. And then when we don't see that, when we see it cross over, then we're like, wait a minute, oh, they're more masculine. Then she's a tomboy or something. We still think of it that way, even though, like, as you said, loyalty is not inherently one or the other. That's what you think.
Going back to the dramatic apperception tests, the ink blot, more commonly known, perhaps from the beginning to how she has evolved, the projection that was being seen was strictly because it was hypermasculinity that was creating her, and so they were the ones projecting, and then it becomes kind of a reverse projection to then the players who are creating a sense of identity through playing this game. So the projection came up first by the creators to project their idea of this hypersexualized female character, and it's almost like in order to balance out, they had to put all of this other stuff because they knew how ridiculous that it was, but it was still a projection that they themselves were doing to create or to begin with. The other point that I have about this is that it's still my problem, not just with Laura Croft, is this intense focus on gender binary, heteronormativity, and also race privilege, because it seems like that's a common theme. And I know that probably, again, this is because it was white men creating most of these games for the first 25 years. But I just wondered if there was any softening and blurring of these edges that we just call masculine and feminine, not male, female, masculine, feminine, but if there was starting to be a blurring of these edges as the games progressed.
So actually, in the very early games, after the first one, the original creator for Lara Croft, I don't want to say he got fired, but he went on, and then they continued making the games without him. And there is if you go back and play the first one and then the second one and the third one, there is a little bit of a shift, and she becomes a little bit more objectified as well. And so that has to do with, I think, getting money, but also getting further away from the original creators, what he wanted to put out there. And I think with the newest ones in the new trilogy, I think they're getting at what you're talking about. Still having some of those issues that you mentioned, but I would say a progression to being better.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
All right, you, sir.
Huh?
Do you have a question? Or? Okay.
Sorry. You were pointing at me, right? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, throw it out there. Let's hear it.
I'm trying to, how do I say this? With Lara Croft being over-sexualized and all that, isn't it also with, isn't it also same to say on the other spectrum of men being, 3 times as buff as in real life, and doesn't it go both ways?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or is it just females being too sexy, or
Sure. Like we talk about, how some people be like, Barbie makes these unrealistic expectations, but like my brothers play with He-Man dolls, and that's pretty unrealistic as well if you've ever seen a He-Man doll. So yeah, it does seem like we focus on one more so than the other, but kind of like it has really started with Laura that not only was she sexy, but she had all of these other positive traits as well. So whether these guys might have been, they look ridiculous and they're unrealistic, at least they had those positive traits. So like, I would go back and say, so with these characters, if they are hypersexualized, that at least they are well-rounded characters, that they have a personality, or else they're just not writing a good character anyways. You have it.
Yeah, just one more comment. So with the last, especially the very last one, Rise of the Tomb Raider, one thing that I really liked was they kind of, I guess, introduced like a psychologically obsessive, I don't know how you say that, but she became so obsessed with this divine source that it was almost like, okay, Laura, what you doing? Like, you're a little crazy right now. And I kind of actually like that because overall, from majority of the games, she really doesn't have a flaw, like there's not really much that you can, if she did, she fix it. And besides from the very first one, because the first one kind of also had some psychological themes in it too. I would hope that the next games we can see more of that, because it just kind of it just makes it a little bit more interesting.
And more relatable, right? Because
Yeah.
like none of us are perfect, and if we're playing as a character that we want to relate to, they have to have some kind of flaw, maybe. And especially if we can see them work through that. Like I think, again, going back to like some of my favorite characters, I see them dealing with whatever anxieties that I relate to, and as they deal with them, it helps me deal with them. Yeah. Also, I was thinking like it kind of makes sense for her to get somewhat obsessive, because if you go back to all of those traits, like you have to be a type A person, and in some situations I can see like becoming so type A and so driven for something to achieve and to overcome. It just makes sense for her. I saw your hand. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, apropos to the previous point, what he was saying. So, like, yes, males they can be over-sexualized in the game industry, but there are plenty of examples out there where they're not, such as the Uncharted series, which is the direct competitor. Drake is never really sexualized. He's always in, like, long jeans and shirts, and he has an average build. And yes, he's handsome. He's ruggedly handsome. But he doesn't have a super, super unrealistic body type, unlike, for example, with the new Jumanji movie, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, right? So, like, yes, there are plenty of examples out there for men that are not over-sexualized, but there are almost none for women. And that's, I think, part of the problem, right?
Well, male sexualization is a little bit different. Like I said, it's not limited to just body style, but kind of sort of attitude,
Yeah.
the way, you know,
That's
their rugged face,
yeah.
rugged features, Russell Crowe type. I mean, some people just don't like a ripped up dude.
Right, but there are examples of ugly, or not, unconventionally attractive men being powerful in gaming.
Or successful.
Or successful.
Okay. As you might know.
Like actors, like Humphrey Bogart was in so many movies back in the day, and had all of these, like, his counterparts in these movies had to be super pretty, but like, not to be mean to Humphrey Bogart, but
Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to downplay anything,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's apples to oranges almost, in a sense.
Well, the power dynamic is different.
plus like, so yeah, that kind of gets into a whole other theory as well, but like, if you think of a culture's desirable traits for men versus women, women's desirable traits do tend to focus more on physical characteristics, whereas when you think of a desirable man, that's someone who has a lot of money and who could take care of you and
Or protection.
protect you, yeah, who is self-assured. So it is more of an attitude thing, with focus on my air quotes. Man by the water cooler.
About the research you said about male characteristics viewed as positive in cultures, where can I find that? Because to me it sounds a bit backwards. It sounds, yes, there are certain male characteristics like power and leadership that are viewed as positive, but also stuff like being vulgar or excessively aggressive and violent are negative male qualities. But female qualities such as, being gentle or kind or patient, those are positive qualities viewed in our culture. I just don't see how negative traits could be viewed as female.
If you want, like afterwards, I'll give you a way to access it. And so, like the first part of it, the study really didn't get to which came first, like whether or not we saw this as masculine, and then therefore we started thinking of it as an ideal, or whether or not we started thinking of it as ideal characteristics that became masculine per culture. But I think kind of what you're getting at is the idea of toxic masculinity. So like, we think of some masculine traits like traits as being like strong, or even just like minute things like whether or not someone is really talkative as opposed to quiet. We kind of think in our head like, oh, we expect a woman to be more talkative and a man to be more quiet. For whatever reason, we just code it that way, our society has taught it to us, even though it's inaccurate. What it seems like you're getting at is when those traits become like blown out of proportion. When you're not just strong and could be a protector anymore, but now you're hyper aggressive and you go out of your way to hurt somebody, and then that becomes negative. Is that kind of what you were saying? Or did I misunderstand you?
No, I'm just trying to think of female qualities that are negative. I can't think of any.
That's, well, we do get paid less. So I think there has to be, for whatever reason, cultures in society judging it as, even though they're not inherently bad, and being nurturing or being based more on relationships, they're not inherently bad, and that's not what I mean. But like sometimes people will see it as being more negative, I guess.
Like what?
What did you say?
Like what?
Like being a nurturer. Those are really great traits to be, but how often, if you have kids or we've just been around kids, how often are kids encouraged, like, someday, Tommy, you could grow up and be a house, like a stay-at-home dad?
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't it would be cool, it would be great if Tommy did that. That is wonderful. But for whatever reason, our culture doesn't value it as much.
I'll take a look at the research.
Okay, cool. Yeah, come to, I'll give you my info later to let you check it out. You guys got any other questions or comments? I really appreciate it. You guys are really cool. I'm glad that you came out to talk about it. If you do want to get in contact with me, I'm on Twitter, Facebook. You can email me through my website at superpsych.com.